Welcome to episode 209 of the Campus Comics Cast as we travel to Mega City 1 and to the Ether. This is Scott Reed, and I'm joined on this episode by
Mike Atchison.
Hey, and Mike, you want to do a shout out for JSApril?
Yes, sir. Folks, this is, as of this recording, you have about eight or so days left to join in. Of course, you can always go back in time and listen to some of the stuff that was posted before that, but there's 8 days left in April, according to my calendar. And if you would like to listen and read about everything JSA in celebration of 85 years of that first and greatest superhero team, I point you to the fireandwaterpodcast.com or hashtag JSApril, where you'll find lots of podcasts. You'll find lots of blogs talking about this great team from the Golden Age. I'm not going to read the entire solicit or the promo, but I can tell you that so far the content has been a lot of fun. I am trying to read along with it. I mean, whether you like Green Lantern or the Sandman or any of those heroes from that greatest generation in the 40s, I think Scott and I both highly recommend it. Not to mention, we put out an episode of Campus Comics Cast featuring JSA, so definitely check it out. So back to you, Scott.
And speaking of JSApril episodes, Longbox Review, Eric over there at Longbox Review.
Yeah.
His episode, I didn't catch the episode number, but he's got a fairly recent one, Spotlight on All-Star Comics number 36 for JSApril. So be for sure and head over to Longbox Review if you would enjoy hearing more. It's not a super long episode, just covers the one issue. And it felt a lot like whenever we were reading one of those first an early JSA story where it was like the same thing happening like 5 or 6 times once for each member.
Right.
It kind of felt like that. Not to spoil Eric's review of that issue, but yeah, the story is called 5 Drowned Men is what Eric reviews.
Oh, and you know why it sounds like that is because it's exactly that. It's the All-Star Comics from the 40s. It's not the current run of JSA, and it was in that same format. So now that you say that, I remember it was the 5. It was there was a river involved, and that's a kind of a classic.
Spoilers, Mike. Spoilers.
But if you ask Roy Thomas, it was one of his favorites.
Oh, okay. All right. Do want to give a shout out to Michael Cathro. He commented on our previews episodes. He also mentioned that he was going to pick up Benjamin, so at least he liked one of our books that we had discussed. Now he did say, "Sorry for confusing you with the Cursed Verse book." I don't remember us having any confusion about the Cursed Verse book. Of course, I also don't remember anything about Cursed Verse books. So
I don't remember what I had for breakfast, so I mean...
Yeah, there you go. So he goes on to say about that, my local store has the new books available to order online, so I look at what is being offered from their website. It looks like the Cursed Verse book was from 2023, but showing a shipping date of May 21st, 2025. So then he says, oops, and it's like, so I think what may have happened is I might have skipped it on accident. Maybe he recommended it, and I skipped it, and it wasn't a deliberate skip.
Oh, I see. Could be. Yeah.
So maybe that's what happened. So if I skipped it, Michael, that wasn't deliberate. That was me. Just taking bad notes or something along that line. So now, before we jump into our main 2 topics, which are going to be the first 5 appearances of Judge Dredd, just the mention of Mega City 1, and Matt Kindt's first 5 issues of the Ether story, I do want to take a few minutes to talk about some sales information. And whenever I was doing some research about the whole Diamond bankruptcy thing sometime after the last episode, on the website ICV2, so this is from ICV2.com. If you go there and you search for March 2025, You can actually, and for there's two posts associated with this search that are important. One's the top 50 comic books for March 2025, and one's the top 200. I'm not a paid subscriber to ICV2, so I'm just looking at the free one, the top 50. And this is sales data that they have accumulated from Comic Hub, which is they say is as this is a small non-random sample of over 3,000 stores. So you take with that what you want. But I was surprised at this information. Now, what I wasn't surprised about was that the number one selling book was Batman issue number 158, because that's part of the Hush 2 with Jim Lee, right? So we knew that was going to be a big seller. But what surprised me is that you have to drop down to number 7 to find a Marvel book on the list. And I remember whenever I used to look at these sales lists, if there was one DC book in the top 10, that was a surprise.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Mike, do you have any initial thoughts on this list?
I mean, being a DC fan for all these years, it used to just drive me crazy when I'd look at Wizard magazine or look at anything online for decades. And DC was I don't know if I should say a distant second to Marvel, but it was a significant distance away, I guess, from Marvel's, first place status. And I'm gobsmacked by looking at this. You sent me the link, and I mean, all the absolutes are, I mean, it's after the Batman 158, the beginning of Hush 2, it's all absolutes. And even going deep into the series, Absolute Superman 5 is number 5 on the list. So Absolute Batman number 6 is 3. It's almost unheard of these days to see a non-number 1 be that far up the list. And that's at least that many of them. So
and tied to that, out of the top 10, only 2 of the comics are the proper universe. You've got Batman 158 at number 1, and you've got One World Under Doom issue number 2. All of the other top 10 are either Absolute or Ultimate, so Absolute DC or Ultimate Marvel books.
So that begs the question.
Yeah.
Is the adjective Ultimate or Absolute, is that the differentiating factor, or is it because the quality of the story, art, etc., that much better for the non-mainstream titles? I think my knee-jerk reaction is to say that it's probably because they're throwing out that this is the different take on these characters. But I also wonder, well, if they're doing so well with Absolute Wonder Woman, so to speak, why wouldn't they just make this the Wonder Woman in the mainstream? I guess that's not a great example because Tom King's Wonder Woman is freaking crazy great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you know what I mean? It's to me, it's like if they have to throw that adjective on there and have a different take, and that's selling so well, is that going to bleed over into the mainstream?
My response to that is, I hope not. However, what I think this is showing is that you and I, Mike, we are both continuity guys, right? We want the past to matter.
Yep.
And I think what we're seeing here is that a lot of readers just don't care about continuity.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Batman number 158 is only up there because of the involvement of Jim Lee and the return to that Hush storyline.
Yeah.
Without that, I suspect that, gosh, then it's like number 11, which is just Amazing Spider-Man, is then the next, absolute or ultimate story.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's continuity just doesn't matter. What's bad, and I guess this is, telling on me, I have yet to read a single of this Absolute line or the Ultimate line. Because I go back to that, whenever Marvel started the Ultimates, right? That whole extra universe, which eventually was dismantled as part of Secret Wars, where they kind of combined the two.
Right.
And my expectation is with both of these universes, Absolute and Ultimate, the same thing's going to happen at some time in the future. There's going to be some type of crisis, or New Secret War, and they're going to bring the best parts of both of them together, and it's going to go right back to like it was. And maybe I'm just a little bit, jaded from having seen something like this before.
Right.
But that just blows me away.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do love good stories, but the connective
Uh-huh.
tissue is always what keeps me coming back. I like what Mark Waid's doing with the Justice League Unlimited and World's Finest. He's, even though they're kind of set in different periods of time, he's connecting them. And we've talked about this last episode where Mark Waid's doing that new history of the DC universe. I can't wait to see how he is kind of pinning this all together. These 80 plus years of history, and retroactively probably in some ways, but I can't wait to find out.
Hey, and just so you know, Justice League Unlimited is number 23, and
Yeah.
World's Finest is not in the top 50.
No, it's not. No.
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 So yeah, it's just, I don't know, Mike. Our time has come, and it is gone because we're just too old school, I guess.
Yeah, we've been sent out to pasture.
Yeah. But even some of the higher ranked Marvel books, there's that future Daredevil story that's number 25.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even current Daredevil.
No.
It's just crazy to me. It just blew me away. So okay, you got anything else you want to say about that? We're ready to move on to the real topics of this.
I think
episode.
we can move on.
All right, so we're going to start off with our first 5 appearances of Judge Dredd. Now, after we recorded the last episode, Mike and I didn't know what we were going to talk about for our first 5. We knew we wanted to do a first 5 and do something independent. And what we started with, the Goon, right, is what we were going to do, Eric Powell's The Goon.
Yeah.
But the problem is we couldn't find a source that we were for sure had the first 5 appearances, because there's this random, and I don't remember what the name of the book was. It was like Dream something.
Yeah, I don't remember
Dreamscape, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, it had just a few pages of the Goon, kind of introducing it there before the story proper. So at that point, I said, well, I'll just think of something. And then as I was going through books from this collection that I bought recently, what do I come across but Eagle Comics #1, Judge Dredd. Now, this, of course, is not the first appearance of Judge Dredd, but it was like, oh, hey, we need an indie character. Why don't we talk about Judge Dredd? And you kind of gave me, I felt like it was a pretty emphatic yes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
On Judge Dredd. Okay, all right. So Mike, do you remember what your first experience was, or exposure to Judge Dredd was?
Well, I know it was pre-Sylvester Stallone movie, which was 1995, but how far back into the 80s we're talking, I'm not sure. I'm really thinking it was the Eagles comics around, because I remember it being color. It wasn't black and white. Mm-hmm. And I can only assume, since they're not in my collection anymore, they were probably part of the first Mike comic sell-off in the late 80s to Dennis at Campus Comics. So I can't say for sure because I don't have them anymore, but I do remember reading and being, it was typical 80s fare, that over-the-top action hero stuff.
Yeah. Well, for me, and I cannot say this with 100% confidence, but I have a recollection of seeing, there was a mini-series called Judge Dredd, The Judge Child Quest. This was a 5-issue series that came out from Eagle Comics. Of course, I guess they were the American licensee of Judge Dredd. Now, I'm looking at the cover, and it sure looks like a Brian Boland cover, though I don't see his signature on it anyplace. But I'm pretty sure this was my first time picking up an issue of Judge Dredd, was this limited series. And then throughout time, I have picked up and read a few other books as well. But I guess I should see when this series came out. So this series came out, I guess, August of 1985. So that's about the right time frame,
mm-hmm.
which would put that at the time period where my poor mother was still having to drive me an hour to Carbondale once a month to go pick up my comics. because I was not old enough to drive yet. So, so 1985 would probably be right around that time frame, and I probably saw it on the shelf. So I assumed that the other Judge Dredd line was coming out, but for whatever reason, this book is what I remember seeing. So,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm going to go with as my first, exposure to Judge Dredd was this Judge Dredd: The Judge Child Quest, which I have zero memory, though I do remember like the covers. The covers, like there's this one of a guy sitting there, and like blocks of him are cut out, and there was some pretty good art on the covers. I don't even remember what the insides looked like. So
I mean, that's kind of a given. I mean, the artists back then, and continuing on, they seemed, that 2000 AD crowd seemed to really just nurture those great British artists. I mean, Brian Boland. I got a book that I bought at a silent auction recently called True Brit. And it's got it's basically the celebration of the great comic book artists of the UK, edited by George Corey, and this cover is Judge Dredd by Brian Boland. So I doubt that it's the same cover you were talking about, but I problematically, though, I didn't get a chance to read this before we even recorded, so I don't have any information to give you out of it, but I bet there's some good stuff to talk about in there.
So I just sent you in the chat the cover that I remember as the first one. So, and like I said, if that's not a Brian Boland cover, then
for sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that guy's scary.
Yeah, and I tell you what's crazy. It's like it's Dredd standing there holding up this photo, to this kind of spiked monster. And I actually had forgotten about the spiked monster. What's crazy is all I remembered was Dredd holding the photo. That's what I remember from
Really?
this cover. Not the spiked monster, but Dredd holding the photo, showing it to him. It's like It's like one of those things. Have you seen this guy?
Right. And it's got that very typical British humor in these books. It's got that tongue-in-cheek. The monster saying, "Nah, haven't seen him."
Haven't seen him. Yeah. So, all right. So, go to our standard questions. Mike, your initial opinion, thoughts on this version of Judge Dredd?
Well, I probably tipped my hand a bit by saying it was I remember thinking Sylvester Stallone couldn't have been a better pick for the movie because it's just an 80s type action,
I'm sorry, the first Dredd movie was not that good. The only Dredd movie worth talking about is the
2012
Carl Urban, where he never takes the helmet off.
Yes, yeah, no, it wasn't, but this again, it's somewhat limited my experience with this character, but I remember thinking that while there's some good quality on the art and writing, it wasn't a character I felt like I really wanted to follow. It's the premise is interesting because these are cops that are judge, jury, and executioner, in a futuristic city, and that's what it is. I mean, you can, if you like kind of that idea, then I think, and it's ironic now because it probably wouldn't be as. It's still a satire of American law enforcement or maybe even British law enforcement. I mean, that's the way it's played up. Is it's satirical. It's we know the cops don't really act this way, but they are playing up on some of the predilections or maybe some of the weaknesses in the law enforcement system. And but in that respect, it was good. So it's but like again, it didn't have that you mentioned earlier talking about continuity, and it didn't really have that for me. There wasn't a storyline that was readily accessible to me, and I don't know that it was really accessible comics for me. But that's my initial thoughts.
Yeah, and here's what we forgot to do. We forgot to mention what these 5 issues were that were his first appearances.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have that written down, or do you want me to try to go through?
I don't. But yeah.
So he appears in 2000 AD, which is a British. It wasn't weekly, was it? Was it a weekly?
It was weekly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And it was what? Was it issue started in issue 2
Two,
or
yeah,
4?
because one they
2. Okay.
two they didn't have the material wasn't ready when they decided to put this feature in 2000 AD. They didn't have it ready for issue 1 or Prog 1, short for program. It wasn't available for Prog 1, so it didn't make it until 2.
Okay. But then it was sequential after that. So
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, and 6
Yep.
are where we get those first 5. And each of these stories is only what, 5 to 8 pages?
Yeah.
Of,
Yeah.
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 So it's also it's magazine size, right?
Yes.
So I'm reading it in the what am I reading in the Complete Case Files 01. So I just got it digital off of Comixology. So it's
Same.
kind of like got that extra white border at the top and the extra white border at the bottom because they squeezed the magazine size down to
Yeah.
to kind of fit on the comic page. So
Yeah. I mean,
all right. So my initial thoughts too is like this. It feels like Judge Dredd. It's like it. And again, going back to how much better the Carl Urban movie is. He never takes his helmet off. It's always serious. There's not he while there may be humorous things happening around him, he's never laughing or being the funny guy, and it's a little over the top on the seriousness, but that's kind of part of it. Now, one thing that I was surprised by is I kind of thought Brian Boland was doing the art from the get-go, and that's
Yeah.
not the case. It was
No.
Esquerra was they credit him as the art robot.
Yeah. Yeah.
For here
Square,
initially,
yeah.
inside of 2000 AD, and it's good art. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it's kind of hard when you're thinking Brian Boland, and it's kind of hard to match up with that.
You don't have the benefit of coloring to make distinctions in the panels. I mean, it's detailed as all get out, but it's almost too detailed for black and white because it gets a little muddied. And I mean, whether it's Esquerra or any of the other artists, it's kind of the same thing. John Wagner was actually the creator along with Esquerra, and they both kind of came and went and came back again and stuff. But yeah, I didn't dislike the art because I think it was really groundbreaking for the time, but I don't know that I'd want to continue reading this, like you said, download from Comixology. I don't think I'd
Right.
read all 200 pages of it.
Yeah, we read the first 30 something pages out of 337. So
Yeah.
his first 5 appearances only covered 10% of what's included in that.
Right,
And I am
right.
pretty sure I asked for these for Christmas one year and had physical copies and started reading them. And I don't know if I either got tired of it or I just didn't like it from the get-go. I'm not really for sure, but
Yeah.
I got rid of them. I don't own them anymore, so they're long gone. All right, so I guess the next thing is, what do we know about the character's origin from these first 5 issues? And of course, I don't think either one of us are current
No.
Judge Dredd readers. So is there anything that you think ended up being changed or forgotten or retconned that we see here in these first 5 appearances that we're aware of?
Well, as far as the origin, no, there's nothing in those first weekly issues that mention his origin. It kind of gives you the idea about what this is. I mean, what the judges are. But as far as what's been forgotten or changed or retconned, no. I did, as a matter of fact, have some point of reference to compare to, and that is I picked up an issue of Judge Dredd magazine in the UK a couple of years ago, so I could say I bought a 2000 AD or a Judge Dredd magazine at a newsstand in the UK in 2023. And I read it, and it was a serviceable, fun story. But to be honest, no, there's not much difference between 1983 and now, except maybe the sophistication of the stories and the quality of the art, or the I don't know, the colorization and the art being a little bit better. I'm not sure, but it's not a whole lot of difference that I could pick up or that I can recall.
Yeah, and me either. Like the one thing that was changed, again, going back to the Stallone movie, was the fact that he didn't wear his helmet half the time because Stallone had to be seen, whereas you have a much better actor like Carl Urban who can just let his acting, kind of,
Yeah.
stand for itself.
I think I read
But yeah,
somewhere.
other than that,
I think I read somewhere that the not showing his face was not intentional, but then it kind of became an informal rule, and then that became the formal rule,
hmm
and it just kind of evolved over time.
it's when the unwritten rule becomes the written rule.
Right, right.
I guess apparently like in some issue there's even like he's in the shower and he has his helmet on in the shower even. So
So it's kind of like Mandalorian,
Mandalorian, yeah. So maybe that's where the Mandalorians took it from. So.
maybe.
All right, so now he's not technically super powered. So as far as abilities go, what do we know? He's got the costume, right? He's got the guns, he's got the motorcycle. I mean and his badge, and that's basically And then of course he's defined by his helmet. So I mean that's kind of basically his power set. He's obviously a trained law enforcement officer.
Now I
So,
didn't
don't know,
see.
you got anything to
Yeah,
add to that?
I mean, like you said, it's all equipment. It's not powers, but he has this. I mean, it's got some unique features where his pistol is called a lawgiver, his motorcycle is called lawmaster, and the pistol only responds to him because it's got a palm print reading capability, and if it can fire 6 types of ammunition, a day stick, a boot knife, and stun or gas grenades. So he's got the utility belt of pistols. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it. How much of this developed right away, or did it take 40 years to develop? Who knows? But it's that part is interesting and makes me want to kind of read some more, like maybe some key stories where some of these weapons are featured.
So okay, what are some of the moments from these first 5 appearances that you would like to call any special attention to?
Um, okay, I think it's the use of technology in these early issues was impressive, even though it was back in the 80s and it was for the world of 2099, but it was sort of predictive in a way of AI nowadays, using voice prints to identify. There was one story where the guy had changed I think it was the Frankenstein 2 story, where he had changed his face. Speaking of face, there's like instantaneous like drive-through plastic surgery.
Yeah.
Dream world projectors, which you think of VR. It just felt like it was somewhat prescient of. Is that the right word? Anyway,
Yeah.
it would seem like it was spot on with that. I did one other moment that I wanted to point out and maybe you noticed, but on issue 4 there was a villain, and he started out as being some sort of a salesman, but he ended up being the villain, and he had a particular name that is the name of a British artist. Do you know who that is?
Oh, I don't remember, and I'm trying to get to issue 4, but go ahead.
Okay, so it's Kevin O'Neill, and
I do remember that. Yeah.
yeah. So clearly it has to be an homage or a reference to the actual artist who just passed a couple years ago. But he did some work with Alan Moore on what was that series he did with the gentleman? Oh boy.
Not the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yes, that's it. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he did.
You saying gentleman was enough to give it to me. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't think of it. Yeah, so it was, and there was some good humor. Couple stories. There was one where that guy that got the illegal organ transplant from stolen bodies, and he was like, "What are you going to charge me with, copper?" Well, I'm going to charge you with receiving stolen goods, meaning the organs. So it was. There was some fun stuff in there, but like I said, it was fleeting. I mean, these were all 5 of these interchangeable stories, basically. I mean, it wasn't anything I mean, I don't want to say not groundbreaking, but it was.
They could have been in any order, and it wouldn't have made any difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was. Yeah, but it was fun.
I like. I guess it's the. Well, I don't. It's hard to tell in these what issue numbers these are, but the one where they make the judge statue. And it dwarfs the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah. Yes. It's so over the top. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think probably my favorite moment, or not really a moment, but my favorite concept is they had the prison that was just like a platform between two freeways where all the vehicles on both sides were constantly moving at like 150, 200 miles an hour. So there
Yeah.
was no way for them to escape.
Yeah.
That's how they kept them in. They
Yeah.
didn't have walls. They
Yeah.
just had vehicles.
Yeah. It's like Frogger on steroids. You're never gonna
There
get
you
across
go.
the street.
All right. So, do you have a favorite issue out of the five?
I struggle with this because there was so little to go on, but I think either the first or that last one, Frankenstein 2. That's when they had the quip about, the guy he was rich enough to be able to get black market organs to make him live forever, and he made the quip about being charged with stolen goods. So
Yeah.
they were just so close and similar in so many ways that it was hard to make any distinctions.
Yeah. And I'm the same way. It's kind of hard with just a handful of pages per to like. So it's really just about the moments and the character itself.
Yeah.
Just some.
Yeah.
But you can see that there's enough. It almost feels like a Kirby setup in that you're just given enough without explicitly saying anything that there's so much there that you can just build off of.
Correct.
So despite there not being a lot in these, it was easy to add to it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So you plan on seeking out any Judge Dredd in the future?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Is that wrong?
No, but that's usually my answer. But what's bad, or it's not what's bad, but I think I'm gonna have to try to track down this Judge Child quest. And what's
Okay,
bad
yeah.
is that I'm sure I've had that series come through in collections before, and I've always just unloaded it or put it in dollar
Yeah.
boxes or whatever the case may be. And now I'm wishing, I at least have some recollection of this story. And then I know I have the first issue of the Eagle Comics series sitting over here in a stack. And it's like, I probably should pop that open and read that,
Yeah. Yeah. There's probably some of the key stories throughout the career of Judge Dredd that I wouldn't mind reading. And if
Yeah.
I go to a store and I see that they've got them at a decent price, maybe I will,
And there's some characters that get introduced later on. You have like Judge Death, who's just like a skeleton in a judge. And then there's a female judge, and I can't remember what her name is. That gets
And
introduced later on.
Judge Dredd is actually a clone, a quote-unquote twin brother. He and his brother were both cloned from the chief judge, is something I read online. So,
Okay.
I mean, you can tell that over the decades that there's been a lot of development of this backstory.
Yeah, so that's what you need is you got to kind of, fill in the missing gaps without making the original stuff irrelevant.
Right, right.
All right. Well, do you got anything else you want to add about Judge Dredd?
No, I think that covers it. It was a unique, interesting character for us to cover as far as an independent one, and I'm glad we did now because I probably wouldn't have otherwise read those first appearances.
Well, and like I said, I had owned the trades of them at one time, and it's better. This was better than what I remember it having been. It's like I suggested Dredd, and then I remembered what it was. It's like, oh, I've done that once before, and it's like,
Yeah.
so I didn't dislike them this time, at least. So I guess that's a good thing.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Well, Mike, our other topic for this episode was suggested by you. So why don't you just take off with that and let us know what that is?
Well, Scott, you know better than most that one of the motivations for me to pick something to cover, if it's not, in a particular theme segment of our show, but one of the motivations is if it's on my shelf and I haven't read it yet, and I need to get through some books that I've already purchased, and they're sitting on my shelf taking up space. So, Ether by Matt Kindt and David Rubin. I kind of had a feeling that you would be agreeable because we've read Matt Kindt stuff before, and David Rubin as well. they did that cosmic detective book that we covered, and I just kind of thought, well, this would be a good one to pull off the shelf and to take a good look at.
Well, and I agreed.
Yeah, you did. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
We had
and
well, I threw a couple options out there, and there was like
yeah.
one for sure no, and some other ones that you've read. You being the more um, learned fellow of us, that maybe you've read
Okay.
more of these comics. So this one is what we landed on.
Well, the ones that I said I'd read, I still would have done those just for
Yeah,
future reference. Okay.
true. Well, we can still. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
hope so
Yeah.
because they're on my. I haven't read those.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good deal. So, all right. So we have this series now. I think it's actually 15 issues in total, if I remember correctly. Um, I actually just read the first 5 from the library. What's called the library edition off of Comixology.
Hmm.
Because I don't have a physical copy. I say that I know I have issue 1 someplace, and at one time I had at least some of the other early issues physical copies. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if I unloaded them in a dollar box or if I may still have them someplace. They're
Yeah.
not in my collection proper. I know that for sure. So, so yeah, I did read this one digitally. This came from Dark Horse Comics. And then there are some key characters that I think it's important to kind of have some general idea about before we kind of dig into this. So we have, now I'm going to call the main character Boone Diaz. I don't know if that, I would normally expect Diaz to end with a Z, but maybe it's supposed to be Dias. Maybe it's Boone Dias
Yeah,
because of the
but
spelling.
I think the S sometimes. I mean, even in
Hmm.
South American Latin or Spanish, you have like
Hmm.
Gonzalez or Hernandez. Sometimes you have an
Hmm.
S ending, so I think
Okay.
you're okay saying Diaz.
So we're gonna go. Whatever I say is probably wrong, but I'll probably now I've said it 2 different ways already. Probably say it 2 different ways as we go through this. But he's our main protagonist, and basically he is an individual who has learned how to adventure inside of the ether, which of course is the title of the story. So Boone basically calls himself a rationalist, a logical individual who has no belief in magic, and of course the ether is a very magical land. So his argument is that the magic is just science that we haven't understood yet.
Hmm.
But what we learn through these 5 issues is that Boone's adventures into the ether have basically cost him dearly in the real world.
Yeah.
Speaking of what it has cost him, we have Hazel. Now, I don't know that they ever explicitly come out and say that Hazel is his wife. Maybe it's just a significant other. But so Hazel is the wife and or significant other of Boone.
Right.
Then we have Glum, and Glum is this lavender-colored ape-like creature who is basically the guardian for one or maybe all of the entry points into the ether. And over time, he has kind of developed this friendship with Boone because Boone has traveled into the ether so many times. Then we have a character named the Blaze, and the Blaze is basically the protector of the ether from any type of incursion that might occur from the earth. So apparently, there are times in the past where things from the earth have kind of bled over into the ether. They don't go into a lot of detail about that here in the first 5 issues. And then the last, what I would call significant character, there are obviously more characters than what we're going to talk about here, is a character named Lord Libel. He is basically the librarian in Ether, and he is set up to be the apparent antagonist of the story for Boone. I would say it was the Moriarty to Holmes type of a setup of characters. So, do you have anything you want to add about those characters, Mike?
I thought the librarian's name was Ooble or something like that. Did you say
Libel?
libel?
You know what? I said libel, and then when you said that, I wonder if in my print, maybe I should have been wearing glasses, and
I think it starts with an
I
U at least.
misread
Yeah,
it.
a U. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Lord
is it
Ubel,
Ubel?
Ubel. Yeah.
Okay. I
You know,
would have
I think when you
sworn.
put a capital L and a capital I together, and if they're touching, It could look like
It
you,
kind
but
of,
it could also be libel.
yeah.
But then he's
So,
probably
okay.
Lord Libel also has a counterpart named Count Slander.
Okay, you know why I put that? Because whenever you, yeah, well, whenever you look at, they have the U and they have, instead of going like a regular U, almost like a
It
circle
goes
U,
up a little
it's
bit.
a
Yeah.
squared left and up just a little bit.
Yep.
So I actually read that as Lord Libel the entire time because of how they did the U.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay,
I
but
can see it. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Ooh, well, it probably is, because but I read it as libel every single time. Okay, so it's probably Ubel. Okay. So anyway, moving on to from my stupidity, we have the first issue. This issue is titled Boone, after our main protagonist. So we meet Boone Diaz as he adventures into the ether for the 1200th time. Boone is met by Glum, a lavender-colored ape-like creature who is the guardian of the entry points to the ether. Boone wishes to travel to the realm of Argatha, or Agartha, to continue his research. Glum takes great delight in kicking him into the realm. This time, however, Glum joins him on his journey as something terrible has happened in Agartha. We learn on the way that Glum is like a deputy to the real protector of the ether, the Blaze. Boone and Glum travel to the lighthouse, the home of the Blaze, where they are met by the mayor of the ether. They are delivered to the top of the lighthouse, to the room of the Blaze, and Boone is shown that the Blaze has been murdered. After some deduction, Boone discovers that the Blaze was killed by a magic bullet, a device that is illegal in the ether. Boone immediately suspects Lord Ubel. It's going to be so hard for me to say that. The librarian of the ether, and heads to the library. Upon arrival, Boone asks for 2 sets of books, the history of the Blaze and the techniques in magical projectile crafting, to show Lord Ubel that he is aware of what he has done. Boone and Glum leave the library, and Boone needs to head home, as being in the ether seems to drain you if you are there for too long. One kick later by Glum, and Boone is back on Earth. Boone steals some bread from a street vendor and hides away on the streets of Venice. Issue 1 ends with a flashback of Boone presenting at a conference discussing the Venice singularity. In the crowd is a woman who has obvious great admiration for Boone and his research. The woman introduces herself at a coffee shop to Boone as Hazel, and they begin their relationship. All right, Mike, thoughts on issue 1?
Well, I first of all, I want to tell you that the copy of this I have that I got from Matt Kindt at the SalukiCon, yeah, and he put a little sketch in the front of what's the name of the giant ape or the
Glum?
Glum, yeah. And he signed it, so I kind of like that part of it. But no, my first commentary. This is like a quick immersion into the dual worlds. I mean, it's that Boone lives in. I mean, it's on one hand dystopian future Venice. Well, you think it's future, but it's like you find out later that he's aging, and he's destitute, and he doesn't believe in magic, but that it's real, but he instead wants to prove that there's some science behind anything that seems magical. So I liked the idea of that. It's I always have liked these stories where you can make these trips to, like Alice into Wonderland. You can go in and out and either go through the looking glass or down the rabbit hole or whatever. But he's got it at very unique ways of getting to the ether. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Speaking of Wonderland, it feels very much like a cross between Ether feels like a cross between Whoville, Dr. Seuss style, and Willy Wonka and Wonderland. It's just all these fantastical features and characters and stuff. It's just really struck me at the ingenuity. I don't know how much of that is Matt Kindt and how much of is Ruben, but it made it very, very fun to read.
You mentioned Cosmic Detective, which is something that we read a while back, right, for an episode?
Yeah.
And this story with when you get to the scene where the Blaze is dead, who is this godlike figure, protector of the ether, that caused me to immediately think about Cosmic Detective, because that was kind of like the premise. Somebody who wasn't supposed to die or be able to die is killed. So
Yeah.
I felt a little bit of overlap there, and I had not put together yet that it was the same creative team. Of course, I think Jeff Lemire was also involved in Cosmic
Yeah,
Detective.
he was a co-writer, I believe.
Right. Yeah, but the artwork and like some of the expressions, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But like here at the end of this first issue, whenever I say that Hazel sees Boone for the first time and has this deep admiration, when you look at the facial expression that is drawn on her from that first, seeing him giving the lecture, and then as they are sitting in the coffee shop talking, I mean, it's so it conveys so much right there, and just without any of the words, just the art that is provided.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
not
that's
like
very true.
ultra realistic art, but it does convey like some of those emotions very, very
Yeah,
strongly.
she's very enamored with what he's saying. He's won her over.
Yeah. Yeah. I also thought it was clever that in the librarian for Lord Ubel, I keep wanting to say libel, Lord Ubel, that his assistants were called Deweys.
I know. I thought the same thing. I thought that was great. As in Dewey Decimal System.
The decimal system. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have to be of a certain age to probably get that too.
All right. Well, Mike, you want to handle issue 2 synopsis for us?
One last comment. The magic
yeah.
bullet. I mean, that was the one
Yes.
that I think it was whenever I seen that little humanoid or little face on that bullet that made me think of Dr. Seuss or something. But it's also the fact that it can change directions when fired or after being fired. It reminded me of the Dark Side Omega Beam, because Dark Side it follows you around. Anyway,
it reminded me of the episode of Seinfeld that mocked the JFK movie about the magic bullet, and that was one magic loogie or something like that.
oh my God.
So
okay, issue 2 is titled Glum. In Venice, Italy, we find Boone as he prepares to return to the ether. Since the food in the ether is indigestible to him, he must eat as much as he can before he returns. Additionally, we learn that to enter the ether, one must be in the process of dying, or entry is denied. Boone wraps a noose around his neck and dives into the pool portal to return to the ether. In the ether, Boone and Glum discuss what he has learned so far. The magic bullet is produced by a combination of elements, with only one being rare to the ether. Glum calls the cab, as there is only one individual in the ether that would have all of the necessary compounds to create the magical bullet. During their drive, Glum provides Boone with a history of the Blaze, including how he was saved from slavery while the Blaze was fighting a creature from Earth. Upon arrival at the Palace of Artifacts, they meet Cleo, who may be responsible for the creation of the magic bullet. However, a copper golem appears and fires another magic bullet at the trio. We then flash back to a younger Boone returning home to Hazel to discuss a job interview he had just completed with the government. He informs Hazel that he is taking the job researching the Venice Singularity and that they will be at the forefront of learning more.
all right. So I guess one of the things that is used in every single issue so far, and in the first 5, is the flashback. There's a flashback in every single one. Most of the time, it's at the end of each issue, except for the Hazel issue, which we'll get to. I think it's issue 4, which is at the beginning, and then it ends with the now time. But that was just one thing. It's kind of like this way to kind of tell the story and build the relationship with Hazel without having to spend pages and pages and pages of telling that story. So again, I just thought that was an interesting way to give us some history of some of these characters.
I mean, that's some of the favorite parts of this story was for me was the last page or two. I agreed. I had the same notes that that's the motif of these stories is that the last couple pages are a flashback with his love interest Hazel, and I like that she and the idea of her on Earth is tethering him to reality, and it's got a little bit of a tragic. It's like sort of a tragedy type story, too. His pursuit of science is kind of interfering with his personal life.
Now, when they say the government, I don't remember them ever actually identifying any particular organization
Yeah,
or anything. It was just generic. The government was who he was hired by and working for initially.
correct. Yep.
Right. Okay. I just make sure I just didn't miss something there.
Even though he was stationed in Italy and Venice,
Mm-hmm.
but that's where the
Yes.
singularity was and
Yep.
where he ended up being based.
And we see more of that later on in some of the subsequent issues.
Right.
So I didn't really have any other comments other than this is the issue where you learn that you can't just enter the ether. You have to.
Yeah.
And this was you have to be on the verge of death or being expecting or willing to die for
Yeah.
that crossover to work. And I've got a comment about that I'm going to save till the very end.
Okay.
But that was just kind of like this weird thing. So here he's jumping into the pool with a noose around his neck, expecting to be hanged. But then once he breaks the water, that allows him to actually transfer into the ether.
It's a very imaginative way. I had never heard of anything remotely like that, and
No.
it definitely would cause it would cause one to pause before you decided you
Yes.
want to go to the ether. You better really want to go if you're going to do some stuff
That's
like
right.
that. Man,
You got anything else for issue 2, or are you ready to go on to issue 3?
no, I'm ready to go on.
All right, so issue 3 is titled The Blaze. So the magic bullet strikes and kills Cleo. After a brief fight with the copper golem, it flees. Boone determines that they must travel to the fairy kingdom. It appears that Boone has had dealings with the fairies in the past, as none of them appear to be too happy to see him. When he arrives at the home of Violet Bell, Violet is much too happy to see him, indicating to Boone that something is wrong. At this point, the copper golem attacks and captures Boone and flees with him. Glum and Violet then pursue. The copper golem then opens a portal back to Earth, and Boone follows it. Flashback to Boone and Hazel as they discuss Boone's research on the Venice singularity. Boone has been trying to send drones through with no success. Boone wants to send people through, but as Hazel tries to warn him and tell him of part of her past, Boone instead stays focused on his research. All right. The one big comment that I have for issue 3 is, again, in that flashback scene, which is at the very end of issue 3, where Hazel is pouring coffee, right?
Yeah.
And you have this transition of the mugs, and it starts off with the two mugs side by side. You see Boone and Hazel. Then you see Boone and just HA, and then you just see Boone, and then you just see B, and then you just see nothing. And there is just something so ominous in just those little panels of coffee cups sitting side by side. And I can't say exactly what it is, but there's something there. And there's something going on with the storytelling that just makes you say, to me, just like, wow. And I don't know why, because it's so simple.
Well, my interpretation of that, although I hadn't noticed that before, I think that's ingenious of Kindt in that I think this is a visual way of showing that more and more it's all about Boone. Boone
exactly.
is pushing out the rest of his life, the rest of his loved ones, the rest of anything else because it's got to be all about him. That, to me, is what that represents. I might be wrong, but
And
that's cool.
That's the conclusion that I come to as well. But it's just,
Wow.
there's just something to that. Just these little things, and how much of that is Kindt, and how much of that is, the artist or a combination of the two. Like
Man.
David Rubin, I wanted to be sure I
Next
said his
time
name
I see
there.
Matt Kindt, I'm asking him. That is
there
great.
You go. All right, let's.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was just something about that scene. I did like the typical thing where I like the expression as Boone's walking through this fairy kingdom, and it's not really clear why he felt like they needed to go to the fairy kingdom.
Yeah.
But they do.
Yeah.
And you could every single person he walks past is just like looking at him cross-eyed. As
right.
he's walking through. And then the person he's there to see is like greeting him with open arms, and he knows that that's just wrong.
Yeah, right. I also like the fairy that gets motion sickness when flying.
Yeah,
I mean,
when
it's
flying,
just,
yes.
yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that was Violet.
Yeah.
But Violet is the one who apparently created the portal that allowed the Copper Golem that the Copper Golem opened here at the end of the issue. So.
Yeah, the Copper Golem made her make it.
Made her do it.
Yep.
Because had her grandma or something like that.
Yeah,
so.
right. That'll do it. I can understand.
So, I don't have anything else for issue 3. Unless do you have anything else for issue 3?
No, that covers it.
All right, I'll let you take issue 4.
Okay. Issue 4, titled Hazel. A young Hazel is dropped off at her grandmother's house. One day when grandmother is asleep, Hazel explores some rooms she is not supposed to enter and discovers a well. She falls down the well and enters the ether. There, she is met by Glum, who sends her to Agartha for quarantine. In Agartha, she is found by Lord Ubel, who captures and tortures her. Lord Ubel learns that Hazel is descended from the legendary... When Glum learns that she has been quarantined for 2 days, he breaks her free and releases her back to Earth. When Hazel returns, she learns that 5 years have passed since she went in. This sequence of events leads us back to the table discussion in issue 3. Back in the present, Boone must find a way to send the Copper Golem back to the ether.
So this issue is almost entirely a flashback, except for
Yeah.
the last just handful of pages.
Yeah.
Whereas the other ones were the story with a couple of pages of flashback. Here, when we focus in on Hazel, it's flashback and then a couple of pages in the modern world.
Right.
This was probably my favorite issue of the 5.
Okay.
Just because of the focus on Hazel, and of these characters, I think the character that I enjoy most is Hazel out of this series. So so we kind of get this background, and of course, this is what leads them to that theory that you can only get into the ether by almost dying, because she fell down this well, and that's what allowed her passage into the ether.
Yeah.
So it kind of ties that concept into how they learned about it, and then just plus you get the idea that time passes differently, and ultimately how bad of a guy Lord Ubel is.
Right.
Yeah.
I just thought, I agree with you. I would, if I had to pick an issue that I like the most or a chapter, it would be this one. I mean, who hasn't had? I mean, if you haven't, it's you're missing out. Having a grandma that will do all the things that Hazel's grandma did for her. I mean, and even if 70% of it is just nostalgia, it is what you remember as a kid when you go to your grandparents' house. And now, I didn't go down into a basement and find a magical portal or anything, but I did.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, but for the best. But I think it's a really cool way to show Hazel's connection to the story. It was unexpected. I didn't expect to see this chapter. And I have to say, somewhere in here, she ran into that singing bird. We didn't talk about that before, but it's like the guy wants you to listen to the bird sing his bird, and he just begs you. He will pay you a gold coin to listen, but it'll make you physically sick. It's so bad, and it just cracks me up, the visuals of this. The bird
I assume
has
something's
teeth.
going to come out. Yeah, something's going to come out with that bird in one of the subsequent
Yeah,
issues.
right. Yeah, it have to.
There has to be more. There has to be more to this.
Yeah, I agree.
Otherwise, it's just a great MacGuffin,
Totally agree.
Okay, now here's one of the assumptions that I am making, because we get that statement from Lord Ubel that Hazel is descended from the legendary, and then when you look at Hazel's grandmother, I think the grandmother is one of the Blaze, because the
Oh,
Blaze
that
is
makes
like
sense.
this
Yeah.
historical line. It's not
Yeah.
been one person. It's been a series of individuals who take on that mantle of the Blaze. And so I'm, again, it's not said anywhere in these issues, but I'm operating on the assumption that that is whatever Ubel says, legendary, referring to the Blaze. So Hazel is a descendant of one of the Blaze, which was
Yeah.
probably her grandmother.
Yeah. I actually had thought the same thing, but I forgot to mention that. Yeah, that would make perfect sense. It's just enough of a clue to
Mm-hmm.
to resonate.
Now, we've been talking about how the artwork goes really, really far in conveying some emotions. And when you get to the end of the flashback, all right, where Hazel and Boone are talking, there's this scene where Boone is hugging her, consoling her, reassuring her. He says, I believe you, but he has this look in his eyes that it's borderline evil. And
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm reading too much into that particular scene. Um, that
It's
it's almost like he's more interested in the story than he is in her.
yeah. Yeah. I could
But
see that. Yeah.
yeah, but there's something there. I think there's something else going on there that we're going to learn more about later on.
Yeah. If we move on to the next chapter, which we could, if
Which
you
we
want.
could at some
Yeah.
point. So, well, let me. Did I have any more notes on 4? I don't guess I do. So let me go ahead and jump on to issue 5.
Okay.
So issue 5, the Copper Golem. Boone covers the portal back to the ether and begins his hunt for the Copper Golem. He returns to his former home in Italy to find some ether artifacts that may help him track the Copper Golem. However, the Copper Golem was there waiting for Boone to arrive. But before the Copper Golem can kill Boone, he is cut through by Hazel. So Hazel to the rescue. Hazel shows Boone a map from the ether that has suddenly begun having holes appear in it. The holes coincide with the portals that Boone has been using. Boone returns to the ether to confront Lord Ubel with the evidence he has procured against him. Lord Libel, see, I did it. I'm still reading it there. So Lord Ubel informs him his evidence is all conjecture and threatens, not physically, both Boone and Glum. Lord Ubel is seen studying a map of Earth as the pair leave. Boone and Glum plan to continue to prove Lord Ubel is responsible for the death of the Blaze. One final flashback to Boone with Hazel as he attempts to enter the ether for the first time. The off-panel government officials informs them that one must be dying to enter the ether, so Boone jumps in with a cyanide capsule in his mouth. Which concludes the first volume of Ether by Matt Kindt and Dave Rubin.
Yeah.
All right, comments on issue 5.
You know, when I didn't know that this wasn't like all inclusive, like this was the end of the story. I didn't know it was the first of 2 or 3 or 4 trades. I was expecting more of a definitive ending than what we got.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm happy enough that it's a bit sad. Anytime where you have this time travel, or not time travel, but like the pacing of time being different for 2 different people. You know, when he comes at that in this issue, when Hazel and Boone meet again, and it's been a long time, and so much water under the bridge, and she's gray-haired, and she saved him from the golem. But yeah, I'm interested enough that I'm kind of wanting to like figure out what happens next, and knowing that there's a lot more to it that I've almost got to.
Well, when you said first volume of Ether 1 to 5, and then I read this 5th issue, and it's like, I had to go back and double check. Okay, did Mike have the issue count wrong or something, because should it have been 1 through 6? I went and found the volume 1, so I got the library edition to make sure the volume 1 wasn't actually through 6, and I should read one more issue. But yeah, so I agree, and I am definitely invested in trying to learn what happens next.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just going to call it a montage. of that scene where after Hazel kills the golem and they
Mm-hmm.
walk back into the house, and you've got the present day, and you've got these 3 panels from the past back to the present day. And that basically tells kind of the entire story of, of their relationship in those 3 panels. So, it's like it starts with Boone trying to pull Hazel to go with him,
Yeah.
and she's pointing back at the children. Then Boone leaving again with the children in their room, and then Boone leaving to a despairing Hazel with the children apparently, either just closing their doors or already having left the house.
Right.
So it's just like it kind of tells that whole story of their relationship in like 3 panels, and it does
Yeah.
it very, very well.
Yeah. It does.
Yeah. So something that we learned, which we didn't talk about, is that Hazel becomes pregnant, has twins. So we can see the 2 twin girls here in this story. So
Yep.
now I have a note. It's like to me the weakest part of this entire story is like the detective work. It doesn't really feel like he's done any real detective work. It's kind of like he just kind of knows who it is from the get go, and just trying to, I don't know, come up with some way to, I don't know, justify it. So there's not really any investigation. I don't think that's what the focus of the story is supposed to be anyway.
No.
And I think it's pretty clear from the get go who the bad guy is.
I mean, yeah. I
you
mean,
could-
Glum is basically calling Laura Dubel out right off the bat, saying, "This is the guy that did it. We got to catch him." And I'm thinking, okay, that's just a red herring. There's going to be a twist at the end, but there really wasn't. Laura Dubel is the
And then
bad
especially
guy.
in the Hazel issue, whenever you see the torture room that he puts Hazel into for those 2 days, yeah, there's almost no doubt. So
Yeah.
it's going to be if it ends up randomly being somebody else, it's going to be a big surprise.
Right. Maybe they'll be like in Fables. You had a bad guy, but then you had the big bad guy that you didn't know about. So yeah.
Maybe so. All right. So I mentioned before that this whole concept of somebody having to die to get into the ether. So what that reminds me of is it was a Twilight Zone episode, which was based off of a short story called "The Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge," and the premise of that is set in the Civil War, and now I can't remember if it was a Confederate. I think it was a Confederate soldier was captured, and he's going to be hanged on this bridge, which is the Owl Creek Bridge. So you see him hanged, but when he's hanged, the rope breaks. So he escapes, and he has to return home. So it's just this concept of him escaping capture, and so like in this 30-minute episode or something like that, and he arrives at his home, he sees his wife, and then back at the bridge, the rope catches and breaks his neck. So it was all this, something in his mind as he's being hung that actually is happening.
Wow.
But in actuality, he actually dies on the bridge.
Oh my gosh, that's
So-
wild. I need to watch
so-
that.
Yeah, by the way, it's the final episode of the Twilight Zone. All right,
Okay.
just so you know. But I'm just wondering if, when all's said and done, is if in that first attempt with the cyanide capsule, it's going to end up that Boone died.
Yeah.
It's like I could see that. I could see
could
that
be.
happening. Probably not, but
And all this
who
was in
knows?
his
That's
mind.
just what made me think of. So
Yeah. Wow. Now you really have me intrigued.
and it's only like 30 minutes, so it was like I think it was like a French writer, or originally released in France or something like that, and then they showed it as part of the Twilight Zone. So
Yeah.
all right, anyway, so that's a little side thing there. So you got any final comments about this one, Mike?
No, I think Matt Kindt is impressing me more with every read of his work. He's a local, somewhat yokel.
somewhat
Yeah.
local. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had the pleasure of meeting him, so I'm glad that we got to cover this, and I'm glad that I'm somewhat intrigued to maybe continue this. Not every first volume is like, I got to read the next volume, but this one I have that feeling.
I'm the same way. I thank you very much for recommending this because I don't know that I ever, as much as I like Matt Kindt, just something about the title, it just didn't
Ether, yeah.
really convey what the book was about.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, you suggested it, we'll read it. But man, I'm pretty impressed with this. So I'm glad I went ahead and bought the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I can continue and read the rest of it. I don't have to worry about tracking it down or going and buying volume 2 and 3. I've got the whole story.
There you go.
You know, chapter 6 is titled The Mayor, so we get Cleo back. So apparently, I don't know if that's just, there's 15 characters that are worth mentioning. I should have mentioned more than the 5. But yeah, it's very good. So you want to give it a grade? Or you want me to go first?
I will give this. Ooh.
Oh, he's rethinking his grade. He must have had it written down.
I didn't have it written down. No, I'm just looking
Oh,
out
okay.
my scale. I'm going to give it a very fine plus, an 8.5.
That's exactly what I'm giving it. Very
It's
fine
just,
plus 8.5.
there are a
Yeah.
lot of, seems like there's a lot of books that we read that fall into that, anywhere between fine to near mint. That is
Yeah.
a very popular, segment.
Yeah.
And
Well,
yeah,
you know my rating, right? And
right. I know
we
yeah,
go by the scale, but 8 or higher is something I feel like I got to own. So I'm
right.
fortunate that I already own the first issue of this. So I'm just going to pull it out of this one box that I have it in. I know exactly where it is. It's going to into my collection.
Yeah,
So it's going to become a keeper just because
Yep.
of how much I enjoyed this. Now, we'll see after 2 more volumes if I still feel the same way about it. I don't know that this is for everybody. I think my personal grade might even be closer to that very fine near mint 9.0.
Mm,
But because I don't know that this is going to be a story for everybody, that's why I'm kind of pulling it back down to an 8.5. But this is super solid. So if you and the layout, and we didn't talk very much about the art, just a little bit talking about the expressions and stuff. But there was like the scene where they're going to the Palace of Artifacts, and it's basically kind of like this. I can't remember if it's a 1-page or two-page spread, but the storytelling starts up here in the upper left-hand corner, and they're walking this path that makes this S, or it's
Oh.
almost like a question mark. But so the text, the writing goes, you read the art following, or read the words following the path,
right.
instead of reading like just straight left to right or up down
Yeah,
like you do
right.
in a traditional. But because of how that path is drawn in and where they are placed walking that path, you know exactly how it's supposed to be read and in what order those word balloons are supposed to be read. And
Yeah.
it's just another one of those really, really simple elements that got included into this that just really just brings
It
us
make
up from an art and storytelling perspective.
it makes me wonder if that wasn't a David Rubin thing, because I remember
Hmm.
something similar in Cosmic Detective, and I think
Yeah,
this is better than Cosmic Detective.
I do too.
Uh, but I remember there being I think a two-page spread where it was like following the conversation through a long up down a fire escape or a long path or something.
Hmm.
Um, so maybe yeah, this is a good collaboration. These two creators.
Yes. Yeah, so it was just a 1-pager. It was just let's see if I can get that where you can
Okay.
kind of see it.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, that's just it's just the way that the word it's anyway.
Yeah.
Outstanding work on the art. The art style may not be for everybody, but I super enjoyed it for this. So yeah, I feel pretty good about that
I think
8.5, and I hope it goes higher whenever I read the last 2. So
yeah, me too. I really just look at is this the idea of the fantastical, like I said, the Willy Wonka, the Dr. Seuss, all that seems like it's so crazy. It's just it's fun to see art, on those kinds of characters and see it's just there's like no holds barred.
but I look at this and I think of something like Saga, which I know a lot of people really, really dig.
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't care for Saga. I think I
Yeah.
read the first 1 or 2 volumes, and it's just like, it's just not for me. But this just
Yeah.
had such a different feel to it. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So, Mike, besides podcasts at birdcomics.com, how might somebody reach out to you in the future?
Well, there's our Campus Comics Cast Facebook page where you can drop a comment in. You have the Mike's Comic Shop Roadshow at gmail.com email address. And then you also
Which there
have...
is an additional episode that dropped.
Yes, we just dropped an episode about 4 or 5 days ago covering the complete life and times of Scrooge McDuck. I think I've been talking about that for the last saying it was coming. Well, it's here. Okay, folks, it's here. So Matt and I spent an inordinate amount of time talking about it. It's a long episode, but that's making up for my 2 or 3 months of absence. So
that's a 3+ hour episode.
Yes,
if you are into that.
Oh lordy, the editing is crazy. Oh my, yeah. Whew. But it's fun, and I actually will have another one coming soon. I'm editing the last part of it, so I think it'll be way sooner than 2 months. But yeah, then Blue Sky, you can also look me up at Mike's Comic Shop Roadshow on Blue Sky. So I don't get there too often, but it is there if you want to drop a comment or send me a message.
And Mike, I don't have good notes, so I jumped ahead. Do you want to do a CLZ Shake for this episode?
Oh, heck yeah. I hadn't even...
All right, well, here.
Yeah.
I'd kind of forgotten about it, so I'm going
to
take out my phone and, let's see, get back to all my comics and shake. And what do I get? Oh, guess what? Would you like to guess what I shook up?
It's hard telling. Oh, ROM or Micronauts.
ROM, yeah. ROM issue 21. So this is an appearance of Torpedo inside of ROM. He kind of became a regular for a little while inside of ROM, because I guess he were trying to introduce him as a new character. He never took off. But yeah, so ROM issue number 31 includes it, written by... Oh, I've already lost it. I've already closed it.
What year was that?
But, I've already closed it, but hold on 1 second. Okay. I can get there real quick. Okay. ROM. Wait a minute. Why is ROM not in alphabetical order? I go from P to S. Well, I guess if I just shake a couple of times, I'll eventually hit another issue of ROM here. Now I can't hit ROM.
That's
I get everything but... Oh, there we go. ROM. So let's see. 51. Well, let me go back to the series. I can't find it. So.
Just curious. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me shake. And I have... Oh, now this is ironic because this is going to have this is one of the stories I'm covering in the next episode of the Roadshow. So the next episode is covering the limited collector's edition number 48, which were the Superman Flash races. 2 stories. One was Superman 199, the very first Superman Flash race from 1967 by Curt Swan, or Carmen Infantino as the cover artist, Curt Swan as the interior artist. Now, it doesn't say here on CLZ, but I believe this was a Jim Shooter story. He was probably like 16 whenever he wrote this.
Is that his very first story?
No. I think his first submissions were like when he was 13 or 14 for the Legion book. So, yeah. So this is a good. This is a good one good happenstance to come up because of the next episode of the Roadshow.
And that ROM issue number 31 was from June of 1982, written by Bill Mantlo, art by Sal Buscema.
Oh, nice.
So there you go. Just because I know you were dying to know that information. So.
Well, yeah.
Oh, and there's an appearance. Okay, so there is actually something somewhat significant about this issue, which they didn't even mention, but this, I think, is tied for the second appearance of Rogue, because she first appears in Avengers Annual 10, and then, of all places, ends up in ROM.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So she also appears in I think it's the same month as an X-Men appearance as well. So
it's one of those. Once in a while, you'll find those like the Huntress appeared in like a DC Superstars and All Star Comics issue the same month. So there's always a debate on when the first appearance was.
When the first one was. So, All right, and then on our next episode, which will be 210, should be our May previews, pre-orders episode.
Correct.
All right, and then I'm Scott Reed. You can find me at burgcomics.com, BURGcomics.com, where there are links to my social media platforms and eBay store. And we'll be back soon with May pre-orders.
Okay, so I need to send you the synopsis. How do you want me to send this to you?
I don't know if it can be in the chat. I can copy and paste it into my Word document here.
Okay, let me clean it up just a little bit because I got my comments in there. I don't want to give you all my, gems here that I'm gonna say, so.
I'll steal your comments. Yeah, that'd be funny.
That's right.
I was gonna say that, Mike.
Or you'll just be like reading the issue, and then all of a sudden you'll just keep reading comments. Like, those insert, tearful pot here.